Hi everyone, today let's talk about ASML earnings, as this was really the trigger for markets to crater like they did today. Then we'll take a look at those cratering markets, down 0.78 on the day, testing some support. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. So ASML released earnings here, and they plunged 16% after a warning of weaker China sales. For 2025, they were expected to come in between 30 and 35 billion euros, which is a pretty wide range, 32.7 to 38.1 billion dollars. And this is half of the range that it had previously expected. And they say China accounted for 20% of the total revenue for next year, and that 20% is less than half of the 49% that it previously said should come from China. You can see that 15.6%. We'll take a look at it on the charts later, but absolutely disastrous, and that dragged down all of the major chip companies, NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom, all tumbling on the report. And really this was the trigger, in my opinion, kind of the catalyst for markets going lower on the day. You can see that straight down sell. Again, we'll look at it later in the charts. And the other thesis here is the China outlook looking worse than previously expected? Are these new government controls to export going to continue to harm the China market? Obviously, ASML does have a lot of high-tech equipment that are used at NVIDIA and Taiwan Semiconductor, and overall they see their business trending towards normal percentages, and they are clearly disappointed, and markets are starting to reflect that disappointment. Also, very conveniently, you can see fear and greed was an extreme greed on the Monday session, and now we've retreated down to a 70, so interesting timing to see that 76 down to a 70. We talked about markets being a little bit overbought, and now we're getting a catalyst that's causing markets to sell off. Momentum back to greed. Strength and breadth really have not moved for a long time. Put call ratio in greed pulling back slightly. I think this is going to establish a higher low. We'll see how that plays. And then volatility spiking up. It stayed elevated, it continued to be elevated, and now it seems to be going a little bit higher. Safe haven demand, also extreme greed, again starting to go a little bit lower. And then junk bonds back into neutral. Moving over to the earnings calendar, you can see a ton of green across the board, even ASML beating pretty extreme here on the top and bottom lines. But really it's the forward guide that did bring down the stock. Even United Airlines doing quite well at $3.30 versus $3.13 on the earnings side. The only red here is from Omnicom. Honestly, a very good result. And then looking at tomorrow here, you have Abbott Labs, Morgan Stanley, US Bank Corp, Discover. And then for the Thursday, you do have Netflix, Blackstone, Intuitive Surgical, Snap-on, and Alaska Airlines. Not a whole lot of major hitters except for that big Netflix. Moving over to the economic calendar, inflation data for the New York Fed, 3%. New York manufacturing missed by a lot, negative 11.9 versus the 3.4 expectation, so big down move there. For Wednesday, really nothing on the calendar, and then for Thursday, a bunch of data for the Eurozone, minor effects, but we do have core and headline retail sales as well as Philly Fed manufacturing. That could be fairly interesting for the Thursday, and that does come out in the morning. And then moving over to Max Payne, you can see Max Payne still at $565, current stock price $579.80. Again, ton of room here before we start to get into those puts. Stock price still way above Max Payne. You can see here for tomorrow though, a little bit up at 583. These have moved up here a little bit over the next coming days. 583, 580, 580. So basically flat to slightly bullish. And then for the Friday session, we do have that huge down move, potential for a 2.5% move down in the 565 range. Again, ton of options in the market. So expecting this to kind of roll down at least a little bit in my opinion. But over the next coming days, it could hold fairly flat. Moving over to the charts, looking at the S&Ps, we did get that big down day. So we saw the breakout, powerful one yesterday, 0.82, gave it all back and then some, filled the gap, hit the trend, so we're on support. Interesting momentum, about to turn towards bearish. We did get a step down. RSI, it's right on top of it. Look at this, we've been flat since basically 1 October. Really 30 September on the SMA has been completely flat. We got the spike up, broke the high here, and now we're pulling back into this range on the RSI. We projected this as a potential breakout here. We thought we might go a little bit higher, but then we've got the reversion. If it's going to hold here, it needs to do it now. If it breaks through these zones here tomorrow and pushes down to that 21 EMA, about a 1.3% down move, that's going to be catastrophic. Again, Max Payne said that we should kind of grind here for a little bit, hold support, which wouldn't shock me. Sideways choppy action, and then we get the roll down into the Friday. If we do get that and it takes out this previous low here, then you're going to have a change in structure, maybe a left shoulder head, right shoulder forming, and then we get the breakdown. Right now, obviously the structure is still bullish. We're still hanging in there just barely, but this is a zone zone, that's super critical. If this breaks down, remember this is a rising wedge. It's a pretty shallow one, but these are usually medium-term bearish. It has been medium-term. We've been in this for weeks at this point, all the way back since 6 August. Up candles here, and now we're in it again. Critical zone. We made the higher high. Again, I am concerned that this is going to break down now. Watching it closely, and then looking at it on the hourly chart, you can see absolutely terrible. Consolidation in the pre-market broke down really dramatic, right to the trend. Here, momentum bearish, huge volume, selling volume on that last candle, continuing to sell after hours after hitting support. So we'll see what happens. Critical zone, it's selling a little after hours. That's not great. If that structure breaks, you do have the trend here at 577.20 or so, and then below that 574.71. So critical. Looking for this to break at this point. I just don't think it's going to hold. It can. It certainly still can. We're at the high from the Friday session, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays in tomorrow and then into the data on Thursday. Again, sideways choppy, maybe grinding, but if it breaks down, it's probably going to accelerate down to the 574 area. And then looking at the Tasty charts here for the 4 hour, you can see we're back into the middle of the range after hitting that upper band. We talked about it yesterday. This is usually where you start to see pullbacks after hitting that upper band. And sure enough, really quickly, I thought we might see a little bit of grinding action there in a slight continuation, but it ended up pulling right back after that catalyst here today. Hit the ATR trailing stop on the 11 o'clock candle, which is at 578.45. This is continuing to trend down here. If it breaks, the lowest ATR band is sitting down at 573.29. Again, pretty much in line with that 574 area that we talked about. Volume ramping here, basically nothing yesterday, continuing to go a little bit higher today on that selling action. That's concerning. That's definitely not what you would have wanted to see on today's price action. We've seen moves like this before where you pull back, hold support, and then rally through. So structurally, it hasn't shifted yet on the SPY, but it does need to hold support here. Moving over to the NASDAQ, pretty much the same thesis here. We are in this uptrend. It is a bullish structure still. We pulled right back to the trend line. It's important to have these trends on deck. Stopped pretty much to the penny at that level. We did overthrow it here. We'll look at it on the shorter time frames, but we broke this trend, touched the 9 EMA, which is at 488.74. You can see a little bit more selling after hours, momentum stepping to bearish, RSI breaking down there below the SMA. Similar thesis on the RSI SMA. You can see basically flat here for a while, breakdown, volume ramp, not what you wanted to see there. I was watching it pretty closely through the session. Big down candle, 1.34%. Again, needs to hold here if it's going to do it. Otherwise, we're probably headed down to this trend line here, which is about another 1 to 1.25% down move. 21 EMA in there at 485.73. And then if that structure breaks, your next dynamic support is all the way down at the 55 EMA, which is about 3.75% down move. And then that lowest trend, which is even lower, somewhere in that 3.5 to 4% range, really sitting at 4 right now. Just depends on how fast it takes to get there while this continues to go higher. So critical zone, again, higher high, gap up, couldn't get the rally into the second day, filled the gap back into the low of this consolidation. Doesn't look super great on the daily chart. And then looking at that shorter time frame, you can see this did stop me out on this move here. So huge down candle, 1.11% on that first candle, big selling, took out the trend. Like I said, I took off my position in here, got a little bit more selling, went all the way to the 144. That was at 488.99 at the time. It's trended up a little bit, but more selling after hours. Does not look great at all. Probably going to retest that at least at 489.15, either tonight or tomorrow morning. Then we'll see what happens there. And then the 200 is not far away, sitting at 487.79. That's the more important level in my opinion. And then again, you can see that trend support sitting down here, 487.30, and then my level 486.84. So you have to expect that there's going to be a little bit more selling, 0.5%, 0.75%, somewhere in there on the NASDAQ. Much bigger down day on the NASDAQ as well, more affected by that ASML earnings and the chip sell-off. Moving over to the Tasty charts here for the 4 hour on the Qs. Again, you can see that big sell candle took out the ATR trailing stop. So we're actually in bearish conditions here on the Qs. Current support is the 55 EMA there at 489.45. Tested that today, more selling on this next candle. My expectations is that this is going to sell some more down to that 89 EMA, which is currently at 486.50 right here, just below that lowest ATR band. You can see ATR bands rolling down slightly, and that price target would be 486.92. So again, right in that same range. We'll see how that plays. That was support before, got the rally up off of that level. Now we're going to test it again, in my opinion. We'll see what happens there. Still a bullish structure. Everything continues to look good. in the medium term, but in this short term, bearish conditions might get a little bit more selling, and I do think that's what's going to happen. It was down $7.36 on the day, and like I said, I think there's a little bit more to go, probably another $3.5. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, the Russell actually managed to stay positive on the day, 0.08. It did go a lot higher early in the session. You can see it was up about 1%, almost hit my level 226.01, could not break this level on a closing basis though. Basically flat after hours. I still like this. The structure still looks good, much better than everything else. Obviously not nearly as affected by the chip sell-off that we saw today. Momentum bullish, RSI bullish, still good shape. 221.49 is the support, so still basically the same as yesterday. Would have wanted to see this close above it, but it couldn't quite do it. Found some resistance at this previous high like we talked about in the weekend video, 224.66. Realistically, I think we're going to go to that next level at least. And then looking at the Dow, similar to everything else, gap down and fell, down 0.78 on the day. Support 426.20, falling a little bit more after hours, momentum stepping to bearish. And you can see here on the MACD, step down there. And then similarly on the RSIs, everything else, breaking below the SMA, volume ramping. I would expect this to fall at least to support, if not back down to the trend line here about 0.75 over the next day or two. Moving over to the Mag 7, obviously bearish on the day here, 0.38. I would have expected this to sell a little bit more with what we saw on NVIDIA. It must have been propped up by what we saw on Apple. Momentum bearish, RSI still bearish, volume ramping, looking for support at 273.40. We've now consolidated all the EMAs and SMAs on the short time frame. You can see 921 VWAP, all basically within a few cents of each other in that 277.60 area up to 278.50, right in the same zone. Now that this is consolidated, sideways choppy, that kind of opens up the potential for more selling to that 55 EMA, which is about 4% lower. If the Mag 7 does follow through on that, that is going to be a big sell for the Qs mostly, but also the S&P. So something to watch there. Sideways choppy action for a while since the 19th of September. We're in that same price action here. Now it seems like it's going to go a little bit lower again, at least to test support. Then we'll see what happens after that. We've tested support before. We caught a bounce. Now I think we're going to get a breakdown of that area. And then moving over here to the tech stocks that we talked about, we do have ARM Holdings as well as AMD. You can see ARM selling off 6.9%, breaking some levels after touching that 163.04 level. It was a big day yesterday, big down move here today. And then similarly here on AMD, it had been selling off pretty significantly actually from the high at 174.23, and now we're all the way down in the 150s. Broke my 157.50 level, probably going to push to the 151 level. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. AMD had already been showing some weakness here. Again, structurally, kind of a bull trend. Needs to hold this support in here. Probably something like that. So your support would be in here around 153.18. Either way, tech stocks selling off after this ASML earnings. And that move here on RSI is really dramatic. We are at a 68.5 and we're all the way down to 46.18 already. And then moving over here to Apple and Microsoft. Apple had a really powerful day. We talked about this breakout here. We did gap up and then rally, hit the target already at 237.23, and then we rejected from there pretty dramatically. That is the all-time high. You can see it here from 15 July. I think there's probably more in it. It's holding up after hours. See if we can get a continuation here tomorrow. Apple doing well, even though markets did not. So still could be a nice little play in here. A retest of that level is about $3 higher. And then looking at Microsoft, down 0.1, held in there better than market, still holding that 200 at 418.08. Still watching this zone closely. I added a trend line here that marks these bottoms. A couple of overthrows, but interesting zone. Looks more like a wedge here. I still think this is going to break down. I think this is the critical zone. We've been saying it for a while. Once this breaks, I think it'll go quite strong. But right now it's still holding in there, and it's been sideways consolidative here for a couple of days, really since the 9th. And then moving over here to Tesla and NVIDIA. Tesla was basically flat, 0.19 to the upside. Momentum and RSI still bearish. Still holding support at 214. Actually held a slightly higher low, which is interesting. Falling a smidgen after hours. Probably just a pullback in time. Waiting to see that 214 area if it's going to hold or not. And then looking at NVIDIA, this was another one of those sympathy plays. You can see it was down 4.69. Held the level at 130.35, couldn't quite touch that all-time high, so that's another rejection from this area. Not great. Momentum stepping to bearish, RSI breaking below the SMA. Big volume on the day, 133 million shares traded, so big volume, just about double the previous day, and on that selling candle, so still could hold support, still a relatively bullish structure, but that's a big down candle, and usually that's kind of an initiation for a follow-through. Eventually might see sideways consolidation and then the breakdown kind of like this. But either way, that's a big candle, and it's probably going to change the structure in markets, in my opinion. Moving over to Amazon and Google. Amazon positive 0.18, still threw a big wick to the downside, still stuck at VWAP and the 21 EMA, same place it was yesterday. And then looking at Google, talked about this one continuing to look good, hit the 144 EMA, rejected a little bit from there, still positive 0.33, momentum bullish, RSI still bullish. Still want to see this touch that 170.95 level and then see what happens after that. Maybe we reject, maybe not. Still like this as kind of an inverse head and shoulders, still holding up this structure, but really the clean break here is what's going to dictate if this pushes aggressively into the 179.42 area. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, you can see staples rallying 0.63, momentum swinging, RSI bullish. So big move there on staples. Seems like we're getting a little bit of a risk off style move now, with discretionaries up only 0.22. Honestly, I thought they'd be a little bit more bearish with the way markets are moving, but still in the same consolidation, did not get above the high from the 9th. Threw a wick, got rejected, still at the 21 EMA, 9 EMA, VWAP, all in that same zone. 197.14 is support. Momentum kind of flat. RSI still technically bearish. Volume on the day was pretty decent. Definitely a little bit more than yesterday's, but I would call this same consolidation. Interesting to see staples outperforming so aggressively. Moving over to XOP and technology. XOP sold off a lot, 3.84, broke my level at 135.07. I was watching that zone here. Technically that's broken now, so we'll see if it pushes down to the 128 area. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish, big volume. So bit of a catalyst there. Israel said they're not going to hit Iran's oil fields, so more selling on oil and gas stocks. And then technology, big sell there, same as everything else in the tech space, 2.2%, right to the trend line. Still holding support, certainly could. If this breaks tomorrow, I think there's more to go. 21 EMAs at 225.08, that's about $3 lower. And then if that zone breaks, 55 is all the way down at 218.23. Moving over to 20 and 50-day breadth. Big overthrow, big sell-off, still below the level at 68.14, same on 50-day, really very little change except for that big wick rejection. Momentum continuing to swing to bullish, RSI hanging in there, really no change on the thesis. And this rejection here at resistance does tell me that there's still some selling in markets. This initial dip was not very much. Maybe this is a double top or a lower high setup depending on how you look at it. If this follows through here tomorrow, this does look like a breakdown, retest, breakdown. That would make markets a little bit more bearish in my opinion, and it doesn't look super great, especially with the news that we got. Moving over to the dollar. Dollar did try to break out, rejected, tried to break out again, rejected. Still positive on the day, just barely, still at resistance, momentum still fading, still just about overbought. So waiting to see if this is going to fade or not. If it does, markets will probably flip a little bit more bullish. If this continues higher, that's going to be bearish for equities. Right now, I think it could go either way. It does look extended. If it pulls back, I would still expect the higher low, but even a little bit of a retracement could give equities a little bit of strength. So we'll see how it plays. Interesting right at that key resistance. Moving over to bonds, J&K was flat on the day, completely flat, still looking for a retest of the 21. And then TLT, catching a nice move, 1.22% back above the trend. I think there's probably some more in this. TLT looking for a 96.50 level, momentum swinging, RSI swinging, volume coming in, big gap, big rally. I think this is going to fill some of these gaps on the fall. TLT was definitely oversold. I think there's going to be some buyers in here. I think it's got some more room for sure. We'll see if the 21 holds as resistance at 97, and then you got 55 in there at 97.59, critical zone there as well. But this looks extended. The medium term for me is still bullish. The question is, are we going to get a lower high? And if we do, are we going to establish a higher low off of this previous low? Or is it going to get that continuation to a lower low? So right now, short-term bullish here on bonds. Moving over to the VIX. The VIX has continued to stay elevated. We thought we might see a little bit more fall with this fairly consistent selling, and then we ended up getting a nice little spike there, 4.88. Momentum not really swinging. RSI, it's right at it. You can see the SMA is trending higher. RSI got just barely back above it. Hit the trend here at 2094. High of day was 2089. See if it can break back above that trend line here, back up to the 2250 area. Right now, could go either way. Kind of looks like a breakdown retest. Need to see the continuation if it's going to do it. Otherwise, if it rejects like you would expect, probably headed back to the 1850 area. Moving over to my accounts, I did lose a little bit of money here. On the IWM, obviously slightly positive there. I rolled out quite a lot, maybe a little bit more than I should have, to 223 for the end of the week for $2.56 credit. That's already down to 168, so you can see I'm making a little bit of money there. Might need to roll that down and in. We'll see how it plays in tomorrow's session. Again, I still like the Russell to go a little bit higher. It hasn't changed my structure. Would have wanted to see it hold that trend break, which it didn't. And then looking at the Qs, took off my shares, which it did recover most of that position, which was interesting, but otherwise put on some puts here, which are in a slight profit. $2 credit or so left. 192 was the trade price. It's in $70 profit, so there's about $120 left on that. Again, I think the Qs are probably going to sell off a little bit more. If we see a spike in the morning, I'll probably take these off and look for a little bit of a fall, but for right now, slightly bullish, and you can see these strikes are pretty low down at 486 and 487, so about a 1% down move is what I'm expecting. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of the news today and what you thought of the price action. Is this the catalyst that's going to crash markets, or are we just already extended and this is just a final straw? Definitely let me know, and like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.